everybody. My name is Anna McDonald, and I am the Goodwill Workforce Connection Center Manager at Goodwill in Lombard. We are a free service to the community, and we assist with somebody in. We assist with helping people find jobs. We help write resumes. We help with job leads. We have hiring events. We have computers. So really any assistance that you are going to need with the job search, we can provide it. And here's my contact information. So feel free to reach out to me. I can help you, as much as I can with your job search. We're open 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. So I am, happy to help you. So today we are going to talk about the job search for older professionals. And
I can vacate.
Oh, I'm sorry. This isn't going to be a workshop on ageism. So if I guess that's what you're coming to, hear about, we're going to talk about it briefly. But it's really more about making yourself, branding yourself better in an interview, but also kind of realizing that things are changing, obviously, in the workforce, how employers are vetting candidates, the employer needs from their talent pool is changing. So there's definitely a huge shift in the job search, the interview, just everything about the workforce has changed, as you can imagine. So if you have any questions, feel free to kind of interrupt me. I am having a hard time seeing my chat box. So if the representative from the library kind of wants to keep an eye on the chat, I'd appreciate it. But, feel free to interrupt and ask a question.
No problem, Anna.
Okay, great. So some of the things that we are going to talk about is the applicant tracking system, interviews, intergenerational teams, recruiting trends, platforms used, artificial intelligence, and ethics of using artificial intelligence. So we are in the fourth industrial revolution. The pandemic has really pushed forward a lot of initiatives and things that employers were gradually moving towards, as far as AI, using different application tracking systems, how people are interviewed and vetted, how decisions are made. I mean, they're looking at job descriptions. Are their job descriptions even relevant? Titles are changing. They're needing a greater skill set from the workforce because of new technology. People have to be more willing to change and learn new systems. And once, those things are outdated, which, seem like happen right away, that you're willing to be retrained and upskilled and reskilled and all of these things. So everything has changed during the pandemic. And it was a gradual shift, but everything has been escalated. So there's a new skill set that's being needed from talent. And we're gonna talk about that too. So we're going to talk about some buzzwords that we're seeing and what that means. So some of the things that we're hearing, I'm going to talk about is learning agility. Hidden talent, this is a big one. So because there are so many jobs and so few candidates or people looking for jobs, and many people have, strategically or intentionally put themselves out of the workforce because of caring for aging parents or worried about, schools closing down. So they need a parent or a caregiver to be home. This has changed. People's decisions to actually work. And in the past, big gaps were seen as an issue. And that could be, again, because of caregiving, for aging parents or children. The hidden talent was, or people out of the workforce were incarcerated people or college students. And because of these gaps, a lot of individuals are kind of overlooked. And that could be people that retired that decided to come back into the workforce. So now employers are revisiting what is called as this hidden talent. How can they start, revisiting, people with backgrounds or with these big gaps? The federal government is putting all kinds of money out, to states to upskill and reskill and offering money to go back to school and making it easier to get college tuition. So this hidden talent is being looked at. And I've known several people that have been out of the workforce for 7 years that found good jobs. And, these were entry-level people. They weren't professionals with college degrees or, they weren't C-suite decision makers, but because they had some power skills that we're going to talk about, they were seen as good candidates. Other buzzwords are the upskilling, reskilling, lifelong learners. We're going to talk about that. The power skills we're going to talk about. How work is done is changing. Work hours. These 9 to 5, jobs are considered legacy schedules that, it was these schedules, this 9 to 5 or 8 to 6 or whatever were hours that people worked because of sunlight. And so just even work hours are being revisited, and we're entering in this fourth industrial era of the workforce and how things are manufactured because of technology. How it gets accomplished, there's a lot more project-based kinds of positions, meetings, on the internet, through Zoom, different social media, contingent workers. These are individuals, we're seeing employers that hire people with contracts. So they're not paying their I-9s, I think is what it's called, where there's no taxes taken out. You're just given money. You're kind of like an entrepreneur, your own employer, and you're doing these contingent work or these contingent projects. Gig workers, going project to project. So all of this is being looked at again. Where work is done, people are working remotely. They're working in coffee stores. They're working in libraries. They are going to restaurants or wherever, or in their home. So all of that is changing too. And because now we have remote workers, the talent pool is bigger. So traditionally you may have been competing for jobs with somebody within a 30-mile radius of your home. Now you're competing for jobs with somebody in a 1,500-mile radius. So there's a lot more competition. And so all of that's changing, and better benefit packages. Employers now can offer, sign-on bonuses or better health benefits or PTO. And they're understanding that this, in order to find and bring in this talent and keep the talent, that they're having to offer better packages. So everything about the workforce is shifting right now. So if anybody has any questions, please, feel free to interrupt. I am right now conducting this workshop for my office in our workshop room, and I have a couple people in the workshop room with me. So just an FYI. So let's talk about learning agility. Sorry. Learning agility. So what does that mean? So it's a buzzword, right? So learning agility is a set of complex skills that enable one to learn something new in one place and then apply what we learned somewhere else in a different situation, right? Learning agility is the ability to learn, adapt, unlearn, relearn to keep up with constant changing conditions. So it's an individual that could take maybe a problem that happened in one position and apply what they learned or the results or the barriers and the challenges of that position and somehow adapt it and understand how it applies to a new situation, or even having a brand new kind of conflict or problem to solve that they've never encountered before. But because they have these rich skills, they're able to pull from their toolbox all of these different skills to solve a problem. But a learning agility person is able to adapt to changes. They're able to upskill, and they want to upskill. And so technically, and I guess in a nutshell, this is what learning agility is all about. And it's hard for some people to kind of juggle these skills or to relearn. Change is so hard for some people, but in this new workforce, you have to be able to change fast. You've got to be a visionary, especially our leaders, right? If you've ever heard of Blockbuster, right? Well, Blockbuster is kind of considered, I don't want to call it a joke because I'm lacking the right words, but, in the big world of Wall Street and all, it is because at one point, Netflix came to Blockbuster and wanted Blockbuster to buy them, but Blockbuster was so fixated on, what was happening then and not seeing the big picture of how technology was going to change that they turned down Netflix's offer. So, you have probably a board of directors that had no vision, that couldn't see what was happening or didn't want to change. And in this era, you have to be willing, companies have to be willing to shift quickly, and they need to have the talent that they can bring along with them that isn't going to, bring everybody down or resist the change. And so there's, different skills, new skills that they are requiring from people. So when you're an agile learner, you are comfortable being uncomfortable. You seek out challenges. You ask for feedback. You grow. You're reflective. You use new strategies that are learned along the way in order to successfully navigate any future problems. So these are, some of the abilities, some of the temperament, some of the personality of someone that is an agile learner. And we're going to talk more about that. But according to a Korn Ferry 2021 report, 69% of the world's most admired companies value learning agility over career history and experience when it comes to hiring. So somebody, an a seasoned person or a professional, older professional, whatever you consider yourself to be, they are looking for people that have curiosity, are willing to change over any history or experience that you have to have these certain skills to succeed in their environments. But what does this look like? So some of the attributes of learning agility is self-awareness. That's the emotional intelligence. It's an ability, an individual who's highly self-aware recognizes their strengths and weaknesses. Whereas somebody with maybe a lower self-awareness doesn't understand what they're good at. They can't define it. They don't know what their weaknesses are. They don't ask somebody, what are my weaknesses? What should I work on? Because what we see as a weakness might be a strength or vice versa. So, a little bit about emotional intelligence. The core of emotional intelligence is self-awareness. That's confidence. That is knowing your triggers. And once you've managed, you know what your triggers are, you're self-aware, you can move on to the management of it. And then once you've mastered managing your emotions, you can then, you could you could understand, you could be more empathetic, you could influence people better, you could, read the room better. So it's kind of the core of emotional intelligence is self-aware. So someone that has learning agility, or an agile learner is self-aware. How does this apply to the workforce? Well, you're working with teams, right? Someone that's emotionally intelligent, they know how to meet somebody where they're at. They're open to asking for feedback or want to hear somebody else's perspective. Another attribute is you're willing to invest energy into your own development. You're proactive, you're flexible in the face of challenging demands. You want to be a lifelong learner. You want to learn something and upskill. And it's not, you're not hesitant to do it. It's not something that you dread. They grow into leaders or willingness to grow with the company. It's the long haul for you. You listen to feedback, and they value the contribution of others. And, we're seeing that employers are wanting a diverse workforce. They're wanting people of different ages. They're wanting to work with people of different ethnicities and genders. And so diversity is really, I don't want to call it a buzzword, but it really is. Employers are really wanting to diversify their talents. And so somebody that's not emotionally intelligent, they are not going to want somebody else's input. And they're aware of their biases and they're working on that. Another way to look at learning agility is, somebody that's a learning agile person is open to change. So you're curious, you want to try new things, but somebody that isn't, they shy away from this. They like the norms. They have a mental agility, they're analytical, you welcome complex situations, whereas somebody with a lower learning agility, they focus on the now, they don't see the big picture. Agile people desire to understand, they're open to cultures, and somebody with low agility, they believe in their own ideas over the ideas of others. Results, they're about, they're ambitious, they're self-confident, they're goal-oriented, versus somebody that's just happy with the current situation. They're okay in the same position for years, doing the same thing. And then the self-awareness, and we talked about that's, self-critical, knowing yourself, versus somebody that spends time considering performance, does not typically reflect their actions. Someone have a question? Is there a way to reflect this on the job application or resume? Yes, and that's what we're leading up to. Good question. We're going to get there shortly. So what do you need to do immediately? I encourage everybody in their job search, they need to do self-reflection. You need to spend time thinking about your skills, thinking about your transferable skills, and then practicing for the interview. So let's go into each of these points really quickly. So self-reflection, you're thinking about your work accomplishments. What you're doing is you're just taking an hour aside every day to just think and reflect and put yourself back in the day of the life of the job. And who did you talk to that day? And what were the problems you had to solve? Who did you have to ask for help? How did you have to ask for more money? Did you have to extend a goal or a project or push it back a couple of months, and why? And who did you talk to get that okay or that permission? Or who did you give a report to on that day? What technology did you use? Is that technology even used right now in those industries? So you're thinking about your accomplishments. You're thinking about, what were my goals? Do I exceed it? By what percentage? How many people did I manage? How did I help the individuals that were low performers? How did I do, to work on timesheets? Was there a program or a database everything, you're picking it all apart and writing it down. You're making it really simple. You're coming up with this list of everything. You're thinking of your skills, you're thinking of your values. What's important to you? What's your work ethic? Did you have situations where you were told to be dishonest to your employees or dishonest to a customer? Did that go against your values? How did you handle that situation? Well, what was your behaviors with your direct supervisor? Did you not agree with them? Why did you not agree with them? How did you handle? What was that conversation? How did you solve problems? You're thinking about everything, because this is what's going to go on your resume. So the more fresh it is in your mind, the better you are to talk about it in the interview. So also reflect on what we call these buzzwords. It's soft skills, but really they're called power skills now. And those are transferable skills. That's interpersonal skills, organizational, leadership, and communication. So, we're talking about interpersonal skills. We're talking about assisting others, responding to concerns, solving conflict, and being a team player. So in your reflection, think about your interpersonal skills. How are you assisting people? Were you assisting a customer? Were you a cashier? How were you, when customers had questions, how did you assist them? Were you on the phone in a call center? You're responding concerns. What were the concerns? Where did they come from? Was it from another department? Was it from your supervisor? Was it from the people that you led? Resolving conflict. What was the conflict about? Who was involved? Were you the part of the problem? And you have to be honest about that. How was it resolved? Was it ever resolved? Was it a conflict with a customer? Did you have to give a customer, a certain percentage of money off on a product to come back and be a customer, and be a team player? What was your part in the team? What was your part on the project? Did you pull your weight? If you're working on a team, somebody wasn't pulling their weight, how did you influence them or motivate them to do better? You're thinking about everything. When you're talking about organizational skills, that's follow through, multitasking, deadlines, attaining goals. What did you have to follow through on? If you were multitasking, were you receptionist? Were you answering phones, greeting people? If you're answering phones, how many, calls did you take a minute? Did you have deadlines? Were they, deadlines that were weekly or monthly? How did you exceed them? By what percentage? If you had goals that revolved around money, try to quantify it with an amount. And again, goals. What were those goals? Leadership, that's delegating, initiating, motivating others, decision making. Think about, did you delegate tasks? Were you a project manager? And then again, that leads to, if you're delegating a task, well, how did you follow up with people to follow through on that task? Were you initiating contact? Were you a salesperson? Were you doing cold calls? Were you going through, Rolodex of people? Was it networking? Motivating others, again, low performers, or even you can motivate and influence a customer to buy something. Were you the decision maker? What decisions were you making? How did that impact the company? Did you meet the goal? If you're making a decision and initiating something, who were the people that challenged that? How did you manage that? Did you lose your cool? Were you able to influence them and get buy-in from them? So you're thinking about a lot. Communication, this is a big part of selling yourself in an interview, is communication, right? Can you articulate your vision? Are you translating information? Is it policy, procedure? How are you explaining? Who are you explaining to? What are you explaining? Writing and editing, these are all communication skills. So you're spending a lot of time thinking about this. If you put all this time into thinking about it and writing it down, it's going to make your job writing the resume and in the interview a lot better. So let's take time, because this is about working with older professionals. I have a video I want you to see, and then we're going to kind of talk about it. These are some of the challenges that, the 55 and older job seekers are kind of facing in interviews. Well, let me stop sharing. And then I gotta go look for it. This is it. Okay.
Years ago, I did a video and called it Why Older Workers.
Go.
A couple of years ago, I did a video and called it Why Older Workers Were Not Being Hired. And it has become the most watched video on this channel. I put a link to it in the right hand corner. But I wanted to update this video today because I have a few things that I want to add to it. It's been a few years. Ageism is still an issue out there. Age discrimination is something that people that, well, you're protected class after the age of 40, but I don't really think it hits people until maybe they're 50. I know there's some exceptions out there. But for most people, they start sensing that there's some age discrimination out there once they get around 50. And in today's video, what I want to talk about are 7 challenges that you're going to face if you're an older worker and you're in career transition or you're looking for a new job. So if you're new to this channel, my name is Bill Benoist. I'm a certified professional career coach here in Silicon Valley. And I primarily work with people, professionals that is, in mid-to-late career. 7 different challenges that I want you to be aware of. And because I think once you're aware of these, you can usually get ahead of the game. So number 1, and this was also something I talked about years ago, and that is there is a perception that the older worker is not going to have the drive or the energy to complete the work. This is just something that is a perception out there that you're going to have to face. Now, how can you get around this? first off, really, this is not, you're going to want to make sure that you are age-proofing your resume. I've got a lot of training out there to age-proof your resume if you're over the age of 50. But once you're in the interview, one of the things that you need to do is you really do need to show the energy. And there's just a couple of ways to do this. Remember, impressions are made within the first several seconds of meeting individuals. So just make sure that we're sitting up straight. And, even if when the individual's talking, when they're speaking, when they're explaining things, when they're asking questions, it does show that you're attentive to this, and it really shows that you have a little bit of higher energy level than
Is it
what most
picking up
people
your
have
sound?
just by leaning in. It's a simple little body movement, but it can really help out a lot. So that's number one. Number two is there's a perception that the older worker is going to have some health concerns. And maybe we do, maybe we don't. If you have a gap in your resume that was because of a health concern, try to figure out another way to get around that gap. But the main thing is, and this can be really super important, I mean, you're going to need to come across as being healthy. If you want to do that, and you go back to just the way you're sitting, the way you're paying attention to it, the way that you're dressed, the way that you walk, just make sure that you're open to this. And here's something that I think a lot of older workers, this trap that they'll fall into, and that is if they're interviewing someone that is their age or a little bit older, you want to be really careful. It's like, so our age, get those stiff joints and everything like that. You gotta be really careful about that. This is not a way that you want to bond with that hiring manager or recruiter. Even if they're older than you, you just don't want to go down that road. You don't want to share that there's any health concerns whatsoever, because there is that perception out there. All right, number three is technology, and this is a big one. And I actually did not talk about this in the first video, but the thing is there is a concern that older workers are not going to be up to par with technology. So number one, you want to make sure that if you're using the same type of software applications and software that's needed in these positions that you're applying for, that you have it out there on your resume. But more important than that is you need to be up to date with your skills. And I cannot stress this enough. I just cannot stress this enough. So take advantage of LinkedIn Learning, Coursera, Udemy, Skillshare. There's so many good avenues out there where you can take advantage and learn these skills. I mean, for example, if you've been working for the last 15 or 20 years in a C++ environment, assuming that you're a software engineer, and you're going back out there and you don't really know the other languages, then take some time and get certified in this. Make sure that you have this on resume. Make sure that you talk about the technology that you've been using. And at the very, very minimum, I mean, listen, you're not technical. You need to know the Office products, Microsoft Office, Word, PowerPoint, Excel, these things, Outlook. And again, if you are not familiar with these, get familiar with them. I don't care what position it is that you're applying for. You need to show that you understand technology. I talked about this in just recently careers. The second most growing career out there is technology. And if you've been in technology for some time, make sure that you're up to speed on the leading edge technologies and not the cutting edge technologies out there. And usually that's going to involve, artificial intelligence, AI, big data, these type of things, virtual reality. So make sure that you brush up on this. You can, talk the language. All right, here's another one that I think is really important. Individuals that, when I'm saying they're just talking war stories, they love to talk because they've been around for a while. So you gotta make sure that when you're answering questions, you don't go off on a tangent talking forever about how you were able to solve something, but really make sure that you're following the SOAR and the STAR guidelines. The SOAR, situation, obstacle, the action you took, and the result. STAR, a situation, the task you have, the action result. Again, I have a video, I'll make sure that I link this for the star stories. And you need to make sure that when you're answering your questions, that you are precise and getting to the point, because one of the things that the hiring manager may be worried about is that older people, they do have a tendency to go on and on and on, and that could disrupt other workers out there. So that's something to be in the back of the mind of the hiring manager. So don't even let that come out. And I'll be honest with you, that is something that I have to deal with. You know, I talk a lot, as you probably say. So be careful about that. The other one is adaptability. And this one is also something I really didn't touch much about in the first video. But it's, and again, you know, older workers, we're a lot more experienced. And so we may see a situation out there and know exactly how to handle it, but there may be new ways of being able to do it, but we're so ingrained into the ways that we've been doing these things before. So you gotta be really careful about that and stress that although you have experience in a certain technique or a certain area, that you are very open to learning new ways to do things. So keep that in mind. And that whole learning new ways, that was something I talked about in the previous video, is that through a lot of empirical studies, one of the things that was the number one area where they were able to validate this concern about older workers, and that was older workers were, they did not go to training, or they were not open to learning new things as much as, say, younger workers out there. So you need to stress that right there in the interview. Is if something comes up, sit there and say, no, I do have this experience, but I know that there's a lot of different ways to do things, and I'm very open to this, I'm very open to training. Okay, you know, get that addressed as soon as possible. And then what was it that I wanted to, that there was number six. Oh yeah, forgetfulness. This is something else that is a concern with hiring managers. And you know, when you finish the interview, immediately when you get out to your car, or as soon as you get home, whatever, I want you to start taking some notes, writing down what it was that you learned during this interview process, because you are going to send a thank you email. And this is so important that you get this email out within the 24 hours. And another little trick here I'm talking about is if you have the interview at, let's say, 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning, wait until that evening before you send out the thank you email. Don't send it out the next day. Say, God, I want you to get this out within the first 24 hours, but send it out in the evening hours, you know, like around 8 or 9 p.m. So this way it's in that hiring manager's inbox first thing in the morning. It doesn't get buried, because we've all been in, you know, professional environments before, and you know how quickly our inboxes fill up. So let's get it noticed first thing in the morning. But what you do is you want to go ahead and highlight something that was talked about during the interview. It just shows that you don't have this forgetfulness or anything. It's not something that is going to, I don't think it's something that the hiring manager is really going to think that, but if you can address that, hey, you know, you're on top of that, you're sharp, you were able to remember things during the interview, well, it just takes it out of their mind altogether. And then finally, and I would say this is management intimidation. Again, you may have been working, this is number 7, management intimidation, but you may have been working as a senior manager or somebody at a much higher level than an individual that is interviewing you, especially if they're younger, and there could be some intimidation on their end. So I want you to make sure that you are stressing that, you know, if they ask you to say, well, you talk about over experience or something like this, make sure that you stress that, you know what, I recognize how difficult your job is, and I just don't want those headaches anymore. I am looking really forward to just being an individual contributor. And here's something that I would really encourage you to get with. And you can just say like this, and say, you know, my model is that I'm a professional, I don't have any problems, I don't cause any problems, and I'm here to solve all of your problems. It's a great way to kind of in that, let them know that they don't have anything to worry about, that you're not going to be challenging them, that you don't want guys, those are the 7 challenges, 7 obstacles that if you're an older worker and you're in career transition or you're looking for a new job, you may be facing out there. So get ahead of the game, list these things down, go back and study this and know how you're going to prepare for that interview. So I hope you found this video informative and useful. If you haven't already subscribed to this channel, make sure that you do so. Hit that bell notification as I do know.
Okay, so I shared that video. Hold on one second. Let me go back to sharing my PowerPoint presentation.
Anna, can you put the link to that video?
Yeah, I could.
That was
I
really
can email
helpful.
it to you if you want.
Yeah, I mean, if you can copy and paste it in the chat, that would be great.
Yeah, give me a second.
No, don't worry about it. I'll email you afterwards.
Okay, all right.
No worries.
So, okay.
Oh,
So
okay.
there it is. If you
Cool.
want, I'm gonna
Oh,
show
I'm
it.
sorry, you know.
That's okay. I'm gonna show another
Okay.
video by him, and then you could just jot down his name and Google him on YouTube, or just Google him.
Okay.
Yeah, you could do that too. But the reason that, I kind of I'm not sure I agree with some of what he's saying, but I think it kind of goes back to what we're talking about is some things that some, job coaches and some of the people that I've worked with these are some of the things that we are seeing that might be a hurdle for some individuals. For example, if we're talking about the technology, when I told you, make a list of everything, do your research. So if the technology that you've used in the past isn't relevant now, come up with a plan of action to use it, or at least, if you're following associations or, YouTube, you could go to YouTube. I'm sure you could Google it there, the new technology, to kind of learn about it. And you could talk about it in the interview. But let's go through the 7 points that he was making. Is this perception of energy or lacking energy? For some positions, working in a warehouse, maybe job descriptions are going to tell you what sort of criteria or what to expect in the position. So, if there's a position, I've worked with people that, they walk with a cane, or there's definitely some health concerns. And so, an employer is going to see that, and it might be a liability to them. And in some situations, they, as the employer, have the right to say no. I mean, if you could pass some physicals and you're fine, then the employer should not have any concerns. But I mean, you've got to be realistic about some of the positions too. Can you really do them? So going number 2, health concerns, gap in the resume. So I have worked with individuals that had to leave the workforce because, they maybe were not aware of their legal rights for a medical leave or a family medical leave. It's called an FMLA. So the employer, in my understanding of the law, it's on the employer to offer that, but they didn't. And so this person had a health concern and left their job. And so, they got past the illness and they're healthy, and now they're looking for another job. So, if you have a gap because of a health issue, you don't have to give them all that information. You could just say that you were in a situation where you could leave your job. But during this time, I was taking classes at the library, I was volunteering, however you could, show the employer that, your skills are relevant and that you've learned something. And employers, I've asked employers about that, and they're okay with that. But you need to know too, that I think when you have applied for a job online, there is a section at the end where these are EEOC questions. They'll ask you about age, do you have a disability? So people seem to think that it's the employer asking this information, but in reality, the applicant tracking systems, my understanding is that when they're designed to do this, but when those questions come up, your name is separated from that question. So all the employer knows is a gender, or that, somebody has a disability. They don't know who. In the EEOC every fall collects this information. Companies give reports to the EEOC about how many, males were interviewed that year, how many females were interviewed that year, how many people that were veterans, because companies do get tax credit for hiring veterans, or even hiring people that were unemployed and receiving SNAP or TANF. So these questions are asked for EEOC purposes and tax credit. So not knowing this, somebody in the job search is going to think that they're asking you this question, and they give information, they offer information about their health, when really that's not what the employer is doing. So you kind of have to be careful not to give any indication of health issues. And somebody has their hand raised. Melissa, did you have a question?
Actually, I have a question. This might also apply to other folks here. And to be honest with you, I have a son who has a medical disability, and I actually was on a COD webinar regarding this last week. He's entering the workforce, and I'm an older worker. I'm 50. And what my question is this, based on what they were discussing at COD on the webinar, is if they have an applicant pool of 30 people, can they take that EOC data and look at that pool of 30 people and profile you? Because people with rheumatoid arthritis, diabetes, I don't have the medical disability, but I'm just providing this example. Can they use?
That's a good question. And
but because if you see a gap in a resume, I have family members with RA, and people do opt out for a while because of, medical conditions. But I think, like I said, so if they get 30 applications for a job, will they take that EOC data and look at it and see if they can correlate? Because a smaller employer, that might be a red flag because of insurance.
Well, I don't think recruiters have that information. I think that information goes to the HR analyst or somebody, or, so I don't think they pull, there might be, but honestly, I don't think that a recruiter is going to say, let me see the EOC report, or even a hiring manager. But somebody with rheumatoid arthritis, I have a sister that has it, and she has the big knots, in her hands. You could see it, you can't hide it. But if you have a gap, and people, like I said, if you left the workforce to, focus on your family or care for an aging person, consider it a caregiving position on your resume, and talk about what you've learned. There are employers that are going to still hire you, which leads me to the other conversation of, if they are prying like this, do you really even want to work for them? What would that culture even be like?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. A family member, they had 2 children. They both had a genetic disorder, and he was working for a smaller HR type employer, and he actually lost his job. And, they eventually got insured through CHIPS through the state of Ohio, but he felt like when he went out and looked for another job, and he had a college degree, that, that actually came up. There were just questions. So that's why I asked that. But no, to your other point, I find it really interesting that, I think I was on a webinar with you about a month ago, I mean, people are really interested in the narrative. Does that make sense? You know, I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes a lot of those skills can move into the workforce, like you
Yeah.
said. Well, yeah, don't ever feel defeated about it because.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, we don't, if you go in there with a gap and you've explained it, but and they seem like they were okay with it, and you didn't get the job, there could be many reasons why you didn't get the job. Maybe they really wanted to hire an internal person. Maybe you gave a bad interview, it had nothing to do with a health issue. You just don't have the skills that they're looking for, or somehow conveyed that you're not willing to change, or there could be thousands of reasons why. But if you feel like it really is ageism, then report it if you feel like you need to. But there is a job for everybody, and it's going to be upsetting sometimes. It might not have anything to do with age or a gap. It's just there will be a job for somebody. It's just being self-determined, confident in yourself, not bringing that defeat into the next interview or the next conversation with an employer. But there is a job for everybody. You just, and I know people that don't have gaps and don't have any health issues and are perfect in the interview and still don't get it. So I don't know, but somebody else had a hand up. Somebody else have a hand up a few minutes ago? No?
Yeah, I wanted to know, explain what that STAR approach and the SOAR, because I was having trouble really understanding that video. It was echoey, garbly. I'm gonna have to
Yeah.
listen to that again. However, I would like to know, what does that mean?
Sure, good question. And actually, we're going to talk about that shortly because I have a whole presentation about STAR approach and interviews. But good question. Thanks for asking. Technology. Technology, it seems to be the biggest hurdle for people. So in that reflection that you've done, like I said, if you've got technology experience with something that, probably had many upgrades since you used it, or is irrelevant, do your research on what the technology is in that industry. But the bigger part of the technology issue is that I've worked with people that are just scared of computers. They don't understand computers. They're just scared. And that's on you. There are many opportunities out there for free classes to take. We teach, basic computer classes here. The libraries do. There's free learning online. I'm going to show some of that later. So you have to own it. Don't be scared of technology, and don't give any indication in the interview that it scares you. Show confidence. I mean, there's companies are going. Let me give you an example about technology in the interview. And as somebody raised their hand, I think it was Philip. Give me one moment, Philip, and I'll answer your question in a moment. I had a manager ask me to be a reference for a job for her. And I, gladly did. I liked this supervisor. So I was called and she'd applied for an HR position. And the hiring manager, of course, they asked me, what do you think of this person? And I just thought, she was a great employee, great manager, easy to get along with. And then this hiring manager interrupted me and said, wait a minute. She says, this is the situation. I've got this other woman that I'm really considering hiring. I don't have to teach her anything about technology. She's up to date on everything, but I don't think I could work with this woman. And I don't think any of our employees are going to like her, but she's a go-getter. I'm not going to have to train her. This other person, the person I was referencing, she said, I have to teach her technology, but she's teachable. And I think that she's an approachable person. She's going to be easy to get along with. Well, lo and behold, the person without the technology skills or knowledge got the job. She got the job because she was approachable. She was willing to learn. and had the other skills. So, you know, employers, they're willing, and that's a question you could ask. If there's technology that you're not aware of that has to be used, ask, am I going to be trained on this? I'm willing to do any training. Let them know you're hungry to learn the technology. So don't be upset if there's something in that position, unless it's certification or something with having to do with, safety, like being a machine operator or something, or a forklift driver. That's different. But, show your willingness to learn, that you've looked into it, that you're taking tutorials. So Philip, what was your question?
I don't mean to make you backtrack. The question I had real quick was, I've interviewed, been out interviewing for a while now, but I got past the initial HR department and that, and then I ended up being invited to speak to the CEO of the company. It's a fairly large company, CEO and one of his executive vice presidents. And they spent the next hour trying to figure out, it was a 2-day later interview, trying to figure out how old I was. And my resume was scrubbed, and there was no chance they were going to know my true age, and I don't look my age. So, but that's how, and it came back about a week later. They're interested, but they weren't sure I'd have. This almost sounds like a discrimination thing, but they said, we're worried because we want somebody. They didn't say anything about stamina because I'm very athletic, so that wouldn't have been an issue, and I don't present poorly that way. But they were worried about longevity because they wanted somebody to step into another senior job when that person retired.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's, you bring up a good point, because that's one thing that employers are worried about in general, is longevity. So it takes, thousands of dollars to hire one person, regardless
Right.
of the age of that person. And they're making an investment in this person, and they need you to stay and commit to a job. So I've been in interviews, 15 years ago, where they said, are you going to give us a 2-year commitment? They want you to stick around because it disrupts the team when somebody leaves. And then they're going to start all over. And then, there's an estimated cost that, okay, they hired somebody, they stayed less than 6 months or a year. Well, now there's the additional fee of the search again, maybe overtime for people. So, I think for an older person, they might think that you're not going to stay around, but somehow you've got to convey to them that this is my dream job. Actually, I've always wanted to work for this company. And I'm willing to make a commitment. So somehow you've got to convey that you're there for the long haul. It's where you want to be. It's the position you always wanted. It's the company you want to work for. Your passion for the brand, for the mission statement. So I think that's a valid concern for employers, regardless of age. But thanks for sharing. So number 4, oversharing. I think we talked about that. We're going to talk about the STAR approach, because you need to practice interview questions. So somebody that is nervous, we're always nervous in an interview. Somebody that hasn't practiced, or when they're nervous, they overshare or babble. If you practice answering the question, it's going to help you stay on point and not overshare or over talk or talk too long. But we're going to talk about the STAR approach in a moment. Adaptability, again, this is a big, issue for this new workforce, a willingness to change. And so if they're interviewing somebody that is resisting change, they're going to ask you questions about change. How did you handle change? Did you have to initiate change? They want to see that, you're not going to be the resistor. You're not going to be the one to, whisper into people's ears about, or even complain, again, another change. We just learned this. It's a given in the workforce, change. It's going to happen fast. Some companies are better at getting their workforce ready for it. Others are not as bad. I know I interviewed for Amazon several years ago, and that all of the questions, it was an HR position, all of the questions revolved around change. And the interviewer or the hiring manager said, she says, this is what she said, honestly, this is what I'm telling you. She says, they're going to have an idea in Washington, and the next day we have to implement it with no resources, no training. So it's somebody that, and that might even be miserable for some people. Some might thrive on it. I wouldn't, because I need a little head up or training. But change is good, but you have to somehow, again, convey to them, and in that reflection that we've been talking about, consciously give an effort, think about times when there was change, and what was it, and why were you the driver of change? Was it, was it a new machine that you had to learn, or you had to train somebody, or even people leaving the job? That brings about change. So then, you've got to, change your schedule. So kind of focus on some of those reflection points.
Anna, there was
Yes.
in the chat, Brenda had a comment about being overqualified for, or not being considered because of too much qualification for entry positions.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to what I said about they're scared that, okay, you're overqualified. Is this just a filler job? Are you just gonna stay here till the better job comes along? And if that's not your intention, then let them know. I'm just looking for a part-time position. I'm happy I'm coming to you because this is what I want. So if that's the situation, just convey to them. In other situations where, it's a higher level job and you probably are qualified, you need to convey that, I'm willing to start at this position, prove myself, and work my way up. I'm okay with that. If that's, that you might have to say that. But if you're going to say that, you need to have the right body language and tone and make it sound like I am willing. I realize that, in this other job, I was at a higher level because I'd been there a long time. And it kind of, in those kind of situations too, where somebody has kind of worked their way up the corporate ladder without any education, they've done it because they have longevity, and then they were let go, and now they're starting all over without the education. You might have to work your way up. That's just the reality of it. So some positions you have to have a college education, and in the other company you didn't, because you started working there out of college and you didn't need a college education. You just proved yourself and climbed the corporate ladder. Well, that's just not going to be the reality for some positions, I hate to say, and you will have to start all over again. So every situation's different, but the point is longevity. I'm not leaving. This is the job I want, the company I want, whatever, that means. And I see another chat. How do you downplay your skills? If you have deep technical skills, sometimes it can make the interviewer worried you're going to take their job, and that's a valid concern. I think we're going to talk. I have a slide presentation later in this about working with multi-generations, and so we can address it there. But you have to, and I think the management intimidation, number 7, is about that. What he talked about is conveying to them without actually saying, I don't want your job. And I think that's watching the body language, watching the tone, not being, and even if you do it all right, for some people they're insecure, and that's just going to be an issue, and there's nothing that you could do about it. So but we'll get to that in a moment, and that's a good question. But number 6,
I'm sorry. Can I ask
Go
one
ahead.
question, Anna? Do you mind, or do you want me to wait until you're done with 7? I don't want to bother.
Okay. And then the forgetfulness. I don't know, I've never really heard that ever mentioned from employers or even with the people that I'm talking to that are of advanced age. So that was kind of new to me, but I think that's more about organizational skills. I mean, I've been in interviews and they asked about that. So in that reflection, think about your organizational skills. Do you rely on Outlook? Do you write things down on a pad of paper? I mean, how do you keep yourself organized? And some people, they're just really good at it while others maybe aren't, and that's just their personality and they got to work on it. But you know, what is that strategy to keep yourself organized? So we'll move on to the next slide. I thought that was a really interesting video to share with some really good points. So let's talk about the applicant tracking system for you that are new to the applicant tracking system. And I have another video that I want to share with you to kind of give you a better understanding of it. And let me look for that. Oh, where is it? Here we go. Okay.
Are you worried that the ATS is going to weed out your resume and ruin your chances of getting that job? Well, not to worry, because we've got 5 easy tips to optimize your resume to pass the applicant tracking system. And if you want help with networking, interviewing, and resume writing, make sure you click subscribe down below for more free career content. So the first way to optimize your resume for the ATS is to remove any tables and columns. Now, tables haven't been very popular for resumes in a very long time, so I don't really need to talk too much about that. But columns, however, are extremely popular, especially if you do a quick Google search for the best resumes on the internet. And I actually have a video up on my channel where I reviewed all of those best resume templates and formats, and a lot of them, as you can see, have columns. But remember, when you actually submit your resume through the ATS, it will remove the columns and tables and alter your formatting. So sometimes the words and content that you put inside of your columns and tables can get mixed and garbled up. And that's definitely not something that we want. Now, the second tip to remember is that keywords are king. Tailor your resume's bullets, skills, and job titles to match and fit what they're looking for in the job description. When recruiters create a brand new job posting, the ATS will ask them to enter specific keywords that they want to see in the resume. So make sure that you read the job description so you know which keywords should be in your resume so the ATS isn't automatically eliminating your resume. So where do you find these special keywords? You're going to want to look specifically at the minimum qualifications and preferred qualifications sections of any job description. So just take those keywords and add them into your resume, but make sure they're not in a table or a column. Now, the third tip to make sure you pass the ATS system is to make sure that you use both short and long form of special keywords. A great example of this is human resources, which can also be abbreviated as just HR. So to make sure your resume has the keywords that the ATS is looking for, make sure you write both long and short form of each of the different words at least one time throughout your resume. Pay particular attention to job titles, critical skills, industries, products, and clients. And tip number 4 for an optimized resume is to use PDF or .doc file formats. So sorry to all those Apple and Pages users out there, because most ATS systems are only formatted to read .doc and PDF file formats. And one thing I've noticed is sometimes even .doc file formats, your formatting and wording can get kind of messed up when you upload to the ATS system. So to be safe, I always recommend that you export as a PDF file. A PDF basically takes a snapshot or screenshot of your resume and keeps that formatting consistent and pristine. Now, the 5th and final tip is to export your resume as a plain TXT file. Do this when you're done editing and formatting your entire resume so you can see how the ATS is actually going to be reading and viewing your resume. If the plain TXT file looks disorganized, has weird characters, or the formatting looks a little bit different, make sure you go back in and reformat the original file so that it will be ATS friendly. Alrighty, so there are 5 quick and easy tips to optimize your resume to pass the ATS. And if you have any tips and tricks that we didn't cover in this video, please leave a comment down below so everyone in the community can help each other out and we can all get that next job. Thank you all for watching. Make sure you subscribe down below for more free content on resume writing, LinkedIn, network.
Okay, so go back, screen share. So for the applicant tracking system, hold on, and for writing your resume, right? Because they kind of go hand in hand. I guess go back, kind of overshot this. So the things to remember about the resume is that go back when you're done that reflection part and put everything into nice little columns about what's communication, what's organizational skills. So when you're looking at the job description for the position you're interested in, sometimes you have to read into it, right? So if you have a job description that says communication skills, but it doesn't necessarily give too much information about it, sometimes communication kind of comes across as interpersonal skills. And the ability to speak and write clearly. So what you want to emphasize are responsibilities that involve working directly with clients or experience with presentations, which, is the verbal skills. And what we had mentioned before, it's translating information, influencing others is communication. So you want to fill your resume with things about communication, interpersonal skills, organizational skills. But what you want to do too is you want to cut and paste that job description onto a Word doc and get rid of unnecessary words and break it down to transitional skills and technology, so that when you can look at that job description and compare it to the reflection that you've done, and that will help you, write the resume a little bit more better. You don't want to cut and paste the job description from one job and put it on your resume. I mean, it's pretty apparent that that's what you did, but beyond that, you still have to describe your skills in the interview. So how are you going to sell yourself in the interview if you're not sure of your accomplishments and your skills and, what you've done in your job. So, so what happens when the resume is downloaded into an applicant tracking system is it removes all the formatting and it sorts it into the different sections of that application. So education, contact, skills, experience, employment, it all goes into the section it belongs to. And then it's looking for those desired skills and the keywords, and it's matching it against your resume. And then it gives you a score. So people with the higher score will, land at the desk of the hiring manager eventually. What you can do is there's technology out there called Job Scan. Sometimes I think you get a couple of scans free and then you have to pay for it. But what it will do is if you put in the job description and then the resume, it compares it and it will tell you what words are probably missing or, how it matches against the skills and experience and all that in that job. So that's one way to help you if you feel like you need extra support to make sure it's a good fit. But it's really looking at that job description and reading it, really understanding what it is that they need. And again, there's buzzwords out there like communication, dynamic, fast-paced, flexible. What does that really mean? And that's where you have to kind of like read into it. So if you're seeing a job description that says we need someone that's results driven, well, what does that mean? So, did you save your company money? Did you work on projects? Did you eliminate efficiency? So these are, it's a keyword used to exercise, as an excuse to trot out some of your accomplishments. So you want to talk about accomplishments. Results is about accomplishments. So you want to talk about it and highlight it. You know, when you see on the job description, passionate, we want someone that's passionate. Well, that's a word used to indicate that that employees are expected to do more than their job. And they want an employee that's enthusiastic, you know, about the brand, about the company, about the title, about helping people. So you want to maybe highlight, you know, on your resume, you know, having high energy, however, and that you're enthusiastic, or talk about it. Doesn't even necessarily have to be at, you know, if you're able to get through the applicant tracking system one way, but they're still talking about passionate, then talk about that in the interview. I see somebody has a question. Do keywords have to be in the resume, or can it be split between the resume and the cover letter? You could definitely put some of that in the cover letter. I think on the cover letter, though, you want to really emphasize accomplishments more, and use their words. So, you know, obviously you should be going to the employer website and looking at their value words, looking at their, you know, guiding principles. Use their words when you're communicating with them. You know, use that. If they're talking about, I was helping somebody look for a job in healthcare, and we watched the video of the CEO, and he was talking about care. We care about our customers. We care about our employees. We care about our patients. Well, use that word care in your conversation. So you can use it in the cover letter too. But it's my understanding the cover letter isn't used as giving you a score. It's just the resume. The cover letter just might be an opportunity for the employer to figure out if you are a good writer, if you could communicate well. But if they ask for a cover letter, then give that to them. So that's the applicant tracking system. What your resume should look like is very simple. I'm sorry, I'm having problems moving my slide presentation. It's very clean. No text boxes, no headers, no footers. You could put a personal mission statement. That's your elevator speech, but do not, I'm stressing, do not use an objective or a summary that you cut and pasted from Google that says I'm detailed, or I'm, you know, results driven. Well, okay, explain it. You know, explain results. That's the accomplishment. Explain, you know, being dynamic. Explain it. That's your elevator speech that you want to put there. If you're cutting and pasting using the same objective everybody else is using, how does it make you stand out better than the next person? And it just works. You got to explain it. Quantify things. If you could put numbers in there, or percentages, or amounts of money, do that. Put accomplishments. Go back only 15 to 20 years. You don't need to go any further than that. On your education, you put your high school. If you don't have a college degree, if you have a college degree, put that down. Don't put dates down. You don't need to put any dates down for your education, unless you have a certification for CDL and that expires, or you have something that, you know, you're going to need continuing education on, then you could put the dates down. But for high school or college, you don't even need to put dates down. Don't use your address, just use your city, state, put your phone number. Phone numbers. This is a big issue. People are not setting up their voice message box. I don't know how many people I've called to leave a message and their voice message box is not set up, or it's full. So an employer isn't going to sit around and wait for you. If they're trying to reach you by by leaving you or calling you, you're going to make it easy for them to leave a message and then get back to them right away. Don't wait 24 hours because they're on to the next person usually. Your email, put your email, make sure that it's maybe your name and some numbers, nothing that identifies your hobbies or anything that you're passionate about. You know, you love birds, you love dogs, whatever that is. Your name and some numbers. There is some talk about like Yahoo or AOL or, you know, Hotmail, that it kind of represents age, that people are using Outlook or they're using the Gmail. That's on you. I mean, I don't know. I've never heard an employer say anything like that, but if you're worried about ageism, then get a Gmail account. It's really easy to set one up and check it every day. Remember your password so you can get in there to read your emails, because maybe that's the way the employer is going to reach you. And then, you know, if you have a LinkedIn account, put that in there so that they can go to your LinkedIn account. That's a whole other topic of itself, because in your LinkedIn, you could put presentations, or if you were recorded, you could put that video there. Your references, you know, those are your endorsements on there. People that worked with you that said, yes, I work with this person. They're awesome. They're a good leader, whatever that is. Your endorsements go on there. So, but the resume, when you're writing it, type it onto a Word doc. Don't use headers. Don't use headers or footers or columns. Don't put your picture on there. You could use 2 pages. That's fine. If you have a second page, then begin that second page with your contact information in case it gets separated from the first page. So it's as far as the formatting, it's easy for a resume. Just type it on the Word doc. But the content is really what you're more worried about, right? Is conveying that you have these skills that they're looking for. And this takes time. And that's why I keep saying, spend time reflecting on your skills and your accomplishments. The interview. So let's I have another video from that same gentleman from the first video that he talks about the interview. And I thought this would kind of be helpful for you. So I'm going to share that. I think our time is winding up, so we might go over a little. This one.
Sounds something like that.
Okay, there we go.
Does your resume sound something like this? Seasoned finance professional with over 25 years experience in the banking industry, or maybe seasoned IT professional with over 25 years experience in computer hardware. Here's my question. Are you seasoned with salt and pepper, or with a nice barbecue rub? My name is Bill Benoist. I'm a certified professional career coach here in Silicon Valley. I primarily work with people in mid to late career. I like to say help them find jobs that fuel their passion rather than zapping it. And for the older worker, you're not seasoned. You are accomplished, okay? You're accomplished. And you want to showcase your accomplishments, because myself as a hiring manager, I want to know what it is that you can do for me. Can you resolve my pain points? For you, what you want to come in with is, I am a professional. I have no problems. I cause no problems, and I'm here to solve all of your problems. So let's talk about accomplishments for a second. Let me read 2 bullet points that have came off of resumes in the last month. And this is something, this first bullet point, I see it way too often. Whether you're new to the world of connected data,
Sorry, but there's an advertisement.
graph databases book will help manage the operating expenses by monitoring vendor activities and suggesting process improvements. Might sound good for a lot of people, but let me now read you one that's a little bit different. expenses by 49% through tighter expense controls and negotiating better insurance rates and more effective use of outside consultants. One of these is showing that hiring manager what it is that you can do, how it is going to be that you will solve all of their problems. See the difference? You're accomplished, you're not seasoned. Now, just a moment ago, I said you are a professional. Okay, what does that mean? Well, one of the first things is you show up on time and you smile and maybe elbow bump now instead of shaking hands, but you dressed accordingly. Think about this for a moment. You have a 25-year-old house and it's gone up in value. It's appreciated, just like you've appreciated over the years. But maybe you want to sell this house now. You're not going to sell it just as is. You're probably going to touch it up, make it more curb appealing to those that are driving by. Well, we need the same thing too with your appearance. So, I don't know, is it polishing your shoes or maybe going out and getting some new shoes? But the key is don't dress as you were dressing at the last job. Dress as what is appropriate for the new job. Let me share a story with you. I came out of the banking industry 30 some odd years ago, and I was doing a pivot into the technology industry. Now, in the banking industry, I used to wear a suit and tie. I mean, a suit and a tie all the time. And so one of the very, very first jobs that I had applied to was in an antivirus company, technical support position. And I go in for the interview and I'm dressed really nicely, suit and tie, come in. And the person that comes out to interview me, they're wearing like jeans. They're wearing jeans. And in the interview, they said, if you work here, you don't need to dress like this. And I said, okay, I understand. I keep called back for a second interview. And guess what? I come in with the same suit, different shirt, different tie. And the person, I still remember this. This was like 30 years ago, maybe. And they said, as I mentioned last time, you don't need to dress up, wear a casual environment. Guess what? I never did get that job. You need to dress as what the environment dictates, right? So you don't need to wear hippie pants from the 1960s or something like that, or cutouts. In fact, I always say dress just one level up from the way people are interviewing that first interview. So, if they're wearing jeans and stuff, you wear some khakis. If they're wearing, a t-shirt, you might wear a nice button-down shirt. If they're wearing, a nice button-down shirt or something, you might want to wear a tie, just one level up, but don't overdo it. You want to dress appropriately. There's something else that has to be really important if you are an older worker, and that is, are you aware of the latest technologies, or are you well versed in the latest technologies? Are you aware of maybe you've been using C# for the last 50 years? You're aware of Python, but you're not well versed in it. Let's say you've been using Oracle for the last 2 years. You're aware of Salesforce, but you're not well versed in it. You need to stay current with times, and there's really no excuse for not being able to do this. There are so many opportunities for online learning out there. LinkedIn Learning, Udemy, Coursera. Some of these things are free. Others are very, very low cost, but you have to keep your skills up. answers that came back, but here is the top number 5. So the first one was the older worker was not going to have the drive or energy to do the job. Now remember, this is perception. Number 2, the older worker would have difficulty accepting or being managed by a younger worker. Number 3, the older worker would not be open to change. Number 4, the older worker would not be open to learning new things or going to training. And number 5, the older worker would be more subject to illnesses and taking time off. Well, then they had these same individuals look at their workforce and they said, okay, so can you validate any of this? And they were only able to validate one. And that one was the older worker was not open to learning new things, going to training. They had more difficulty getting these older workers into training. So the others there, it's perception, and it's a perception that is often made on the resume itself before they ever meet you. So by the time you go in there and you're going in there with accomplishment statements and you're going in there with a professional appearance, you've eliminated a lot of these things. And if you can show that you are also up to speed on the latest technologies, all the more help for you. Okay. So finally, I want you to keep this in mind. You're not overqualified. You are accomplished and you are someone who can take the ball and run. And this is conversations I have a lot of times, all the time actually, it seems like, with older workers, that I'm coaching, and that is, well, I know they're thinking of me as overqualified, even if they don't see this. Or maybe they'll sit there and say, a little bit concerned that you might be overqualified for this position. You turn back and you say, I don't see myself as being overqualified for this position. I see myself being experienced enough and accomplished enough where I can take the ball and start running with it. You are a professional. You have no problems. You create no problems. And you are here to solve all of their problems. So I hope you found this video informative and useful. If you haven't already done so, make sure that you subscribe to this channel, hit the bell notification, as I do upload new career tips and strategies every week, and I would hate for you to miss it.
Okay,
I'm Russ Ruffino.
so,
You're a coach, consultant, expert, author, or speaker.
sorry. Let me stop sharing. Go back to, okay, so in the interview, let's talk about we had talked about the STAR approach. Somebody asked about that. So the STAR approach in the interview, when they're asking you a question, you want to start with the S. So you could, they ask you the question, you could give an example of a situation or a task. So you describe the event to kind of give some context to, background to it. And then you moved into the action you took. You're describing the action you took to complete the task. And then the results. What was the results? Was the customer happy? Did we lose the customer? What did we learn? And then you go back into getting ready for the next question. So it's the situation, task, action, result. And you need to do this within, 3 minutes, very top. I suggest you record yourself answering questions. The more you do this and preparing for the interview, it's really amazing how you kind of memorized it. And you could take one situation and really apply it to another situation or another question that maybe you didn't anticipate being asked. But let's kind of walk through it. So they ask you a question about, tell me about a time that you had to go above and beyond for a customer. So let's say you work for a printing company and you have a company that has been, they give you 25% of the business. They're a repeat customer. You want to keep them happy and you are managing the account. They called you a couple months ago, said they're going to a trade show and they need, X amount of brochures and some other items. So you put in the order and you bill them. And then, you follow the routine, you give it to the back room and, you just assume that they're going to send it out. Well, the day before they're supposed to leave for the event, they call and say, hey, we didn't get our order. You're like, oh, it should have gone out. And you're probably thinking, well, I should have checked on it. But you just assume that the back room, the shipping department's going to do their job. So you go back there and see that, John is not there. He left. Nobody told you, and they've got a new person, and he didn't send it out because nobody trained him on, how to ship things out, or, he overlooked it, whatever. So you decide that, you're going to get a courier to come in, or they're a half hour away. You're going to, drive it there yourself. And then, not to lose that customer, you gave them, a little discount for the inconvenience. So the situation is, I described it. You've got this customer, they've been, they give you 25% of the business, good customer, the task, the order, it didn't go out, what you did, you got a happy customer. But you have to say all of that in 2 minutes. So it's practicing, it's recording yourself. I really encourage people to record themselves anyways. And we're going to get into why in a moment. But most importantly, that you're timing yourself. You're, aware of your body language. Now, the camera is always the eye. So when you are talking to the camera, you are making eye contact with somebody. Are you doing that? Are you scratching your face? Are you saying too much? So it's really important to, record yourself, time yourself, memorize it so that you're confident in yourself. You hit all the points, the task, the action, the result. And if you're nervous, I think that really helps you to kind of stay focused. So any questions about the STAR approach? All right. So the interviewer in the interview, they want to gain knowledge about your work experience and your accomplishments. So basically, they want to get to the following questions. Are you able to adequately respond to unforeseeable situations that occur? Are you able to adjust to changing environments? Can you assist your coworkers embracing change? Or are you willing to take on new tasks, even if it increases the list of your current responsibilities? Are you flexible? And I think, a lot of the questions that we're seeing kind of come down to this. Are you able to respond to the unforeseeable situations? And that's the learning agility, that there's going to be unforeseeable, the unknown unknowns in our jobs. Is that going to throw you off? How are you going to be able to go back, and think about these kinds of similar challenges? What did you learn from it? How you were able to overcome it? The change in environment is a big question. And, working with the team, can you get along with people? Red flags, if your answers or examples indicate that you're not open-minded, that's a red flag. Showing signs of being hesitant towards or acting scared of the unknown. You need to adapt to the unknown of developing new skills. That's the upskilling, the reskilling. Red flags, if you aren't open, if you are not a team player, you're not fast paced, which actually I just learned a new term. That warehouses are, the term is athletic warehouses, like these, 300 square feet warehouses, or the Amazon workers. They're now considered athletic warehouse workers because you're on your feet, it's fast paced. It's a very dynamic workplace. Are you able to adjust to different work styles? These are red flags for employers. A little bit about age discrimination in the interview. You know, the Age Discrimination Act was signed in 1969. There's also, you know, some other acts that cover age discrimination or protected classes. Below are some questions about your age that interviewers shouldn't ask. How old are you? When did you graduate? Your date of birth. Some applicant tracking systems, I remember when I was applying for jobs 7 years ago, asked me for my date of birth. They had nothing to do with an EEOC question. Of course, that was a red flag and I just stopped the interview. Another, besides this, that makes me think about it, are job applications that want your social security number. Now, that's a red flag to me. Do you want to really continue with that, you know, applying for that position? That's something, especially in this day and age when there's such an awareness now with hacking going on, with China hacking companies. You'd be surprised at how much hack is happening that we're not even aware of in the public. But, you know, do you really want to give a potential employer your social security number when you haven't even been interviewed or asked to proceed in the job search? But anyways, that's beside the point. So if they're asking you these questions, how do you respond? You could say, I don't believe my age would be an issue for my performance on this job because they go into the accomplishments, you know, or the skills that you think you need to succeed in the job. But don't answer it. Just focus on, you know, accomplishments and what you could offer them. If you feel like you've been a victim, then you could call the Equal Opportunity Employment Commission and file a complaint, and you could do that online. Upskilling, reskilling, you have to be a lifelong learner now. That's so important. 50% of employees will need to be reskilled by 2025, according to a Korn Ferry study. 50% of people are going to have to be reskilled. Amazing, right? That's how fast technology is happening. And then something I was reading today, employers are still scared that, okay, we upskilled and technology is moving so fast, everybody has to be reskilled again. So there's a lot of money going into this. I have a question here. So I do okay in practicing at home with confidence, but when I'm actually in front of the interviewer, my nerves go into overdrive. Yeah, I mean, it's common to be nervous in an interview. I think, you know, a seasoned recruiter is going to understand that, and it's okay. But I really think it's about confidence too. I think that if you're confident in your skill, and, you know, succeeding in the job, you know, if you lack the confidence, I think that might make you more nervous too. But, you know, be confident in what you're offering them. And I cannot encourage you enough to really write down your skills and really do that reflection. I think people are really surprised at how many skills they have and what they've really done in their jobs and what they really offered an employer. But if you practice enough, I think, you know, that once you get started talking, that you'll be okay. But you know, if you're nervous about it and you're always nervous throughout the interview, I really can't think of any important, you know, pointers. It's just have confidence in yourself and your abilities. You know, in the interview, you might be nervous because you really don't understand the position. So maybe if you ask some questions more about the position, that might give you a better understanding, and maybe your nervousness might subside, be set aside. I have some other. Let me see, what is this? Best way to find or identify employers that want to and are willing to hire older Agile workers. I think that you could do a Google search on, best employers to work for. I think asking the right questions in the interview to find out the culture there. I talked earlier about going to the company website and reading their values. So companies have missions, right? This is why they exist, but they also have guiding principles and value words. And the value words are how they make decisions for the company, how they do strategic planning, what they care about. So look and see, what do they care about their employee? I've seen employers that say, we care for our employees. Well, ask them to define that. How do you give me examples of how employees are cared about? You could ask questions about to the recruiter, to the hiring manager. How long have you worked here? Why do you like working here? What's the best part of working for this company? Or why do you enjoy your job? That will give you some indication. I think really paying attention to what's happening, not asking questions, but how are people treating each other? If you're in the interview, and someone's being talked over, or the manager, the, big person, they're intimidating their employees, what's that interaction between hiring manager and who reports to them? Just pay attention to everything. One example is, what are the benefits? Do they offer good benefits? If they say on their website that we believe in initiative and we're visionaries, what is the environment of the company? Is everybody in silos? Is it, are people sharing, walking around? If people are in individual offices, how does that create innovation and sharing and team building? It's so easy to close a door. So pay attention to the environment, how the workspace is constructed. If you're a remote worker, ask questions about, are there happy hours, online? Are people encouraged to kind of, do team building? So it's really asking questions without saying, do you hire older people? Because they're all going to say yes, and they're going to get offended by it. But paying attention to how people are treated and asking that question, I think, is the best way to identify, and even doing a Google search too, best employers to work for. The other question is, how do you bring up facts many people need to be reskilled? So I think for that, you could ask about training. If you're maybe applying for an HR position and the latest applicant tracking systems or the different databases like the Paylocity and some of these other systems, you could ask, what edition is it? Were people trained? But just asking the question, you can even say, I know in this industry that upskilling and reskilling employees is a hot button issue. What does that change look like for this company? How are employees reskilled? Are we given time off to, go to a training? Is that part of, do we have to use PTO for that? Are we given time for training? Is there tuition reimbursement? I think that it's okay to ask those questions. So here we go, lifelong learners, right? You have to be a lifelong learner. And this is one thing that I talk about, even with our high school participants that come in, is forever going forward, everybody has to be a lifelong learner. No longer are the day where you could have one job, you know, and not have to learn technology or uppy skill. That does not exist anymore. You have to own it. And, you know, a good employer is going to provide that training for you and ask it in the interview. But maybe you don't necessarily need that technical skill in the job, but you are looking for opportunities for advancement in the company. You know, you have to own that. You know, even for like HR, I know people have been hired for HR positions and they've been in that position for, you know, many years. Well, now HR really is requiring people to have SHRM or PHR certifications. They're highly sought after. And if that employer, you know, doesn't necessarily require it, but you need to take the initiative to, you know, use your tuition reimbursement maybe to, you know, get that certification to make yourself more valuable to the company, and possibly even leave a company because, you know, you just have different ambitions or whatever that is, but you have to own it. If you are unemployed right now or you receive TANF or SNAP, there's up to $10,000 in free tuition that you could get through the state. That's part of the WIOA funding. College of DuPage, Goodwill Industries, we have this free learning website on just, you know, Microsoft, soft skills. You could go there. Libraries offer free training, take advantage of tuition reimbursement. Even LinkedIn has some really great learning, free tutorials that you could even use. Go to YouTube. That's what I do. I just got to search things. So there, you know, even if it doesn't necessarily give you all the skills you need to be successful in that technology, it gives you an understanding, the vocabulary to kind of talk about it a little bit more intelligently in the interview, kind of know what direction you need to take. Go, you know, look for associations, like teacher associations or, you know, whatever industry usually has some of these, you know, associations that, you know, might offer it. Or even if you have to do what is it? What's the word I'm looking for? You have to do accreditation kind of trainings. Those associations offer it as well. Let's about 10 more minutes and then we're done. Artificial intelligence. This is big. We were talking about the on-demand. We were talking about recording ourselves. We're going to see a lot more employers doing these on-demand digital asynchronous. It's the same thing. It is you answering interview questions and you're being recorded and there's nobody you're talking to on the other side. So what happens is they'll send you like a password to use their app. And then you go in and the system will ask you interview questions and you record yourself answering it. And then when you're done, the response is set to them or they have it saved in that database. So there's the platforms like HireVue, Job by Montage. We don't really have time to look at it, but I really encourage you to Google or go to YouTube and look at on-demand digital interviews. A lot of employers are going to be doing this right now. It's really taking off. And I think maybe in the next 5 to 10 years, I don't know, maybe resumes might even be obsolete. And it's all going to be this on demand. I had invited Indeed representatives to come to a meeting that I was part of, and they were, you know, talking about there's a lot of discussion, how relevant are resumes, you know, employers, and there's all the complications too about, you know, the on demand. It makes it ageism might be a factor, biases, because now you're seeing a person instead of reading about a person. that's all to be aired out and ironed out going forward. But you know, this is kind of where it's moving. It's, you know, you're recording yourself answering interview questions. Intergenerational teams, employers, they want to be more diverse, and we're seeing a lot more generations working together in the workforce. So we see a lot of baby boomers working with the Generation X, which are their children or maybe their grandchildren. And how do these teams work together? You know, we talked earlier about, you know, how do you have a conversation with somebody that might be intimidated by your skills because you are more experienced? But it's, you know, relating to that person and understanding their perspective and their values. And that's, you're going back to this emotionally intelligent person, the self-awareness, you know, part, you understand yourself. And if you could get that foundation of understanding yourself and your confidence, managing your emotions and your triggers, you can then work better with another person and help them manage the situation and read the room. But different generations have different work ethics. And it's because of the experiences of what's happening in that generation. So we got the baby boomers that are born, you know, 46 to 64. Well, civil rights was the environment. The Cold War was still going strong, and that's how they were raised. And so work ethics was driven. You're driven to climb the corporate ladder, and, you know, and maybe they're, you know, drinking scotch for lunch. Nowadays, it's different, right? You don't have a liquid lunch. And, you know, the ethics about how females are treated are different than, you know, a silent generation. Leadership styles obviously are different. You have somebody that is, you know, maybe of the silent generation, it was controlling. You're the authority. It's yes, ma'am, you know, no, sir. They're the leader. You do what they say. But different generations change about leadership, go from directing to coordinating. We were looking at this earlier about the communication styles, right? How different generations change. You have the top down for the silent generation to the guarded. Maybe in this baby boomer generation, the communication was guarded because you're climbing the corporate ladder. You have to have hoard information and not share, because, you know, you've got it, you're the go-to person. But versus, you know, communication for the other generations where, you know, we're now learning that, you know, leaders, in order to be more effective, they have to share information. And we want to make sure that everybody, you know, has a say so to get buy-in for it. So, you know, learn about the other generations, understand their perspective. So, you know, I guess, you know, when you're talking to somebody that's interviewing you in the next generation, you know, you just want to come across as the video, the Bill said in the other videos, that, you know, I'm here to, you know, do what I can to solve a problem. I'm not going to be a problem. I mean, if you are so inclined to say that and you feel like that's okay, then say it. But you have to somehow convey that you're going to stay in your swimming lane. You know, you're not there to dictate. You're just there to do your job, do the best you can to help the team succeed. And that's what you want to do. Stereotyping, you know, is, you know, we stereotype on, you know, ages, ethnicity. Part of being an agile learner is, you know, acceptance of different perspectives and wanting to hear, you know, these different perspectives. Einstein said you can't solve a problem with the same mind that created it. it's thinking outside the box. If we have a problem and everybody thinks the same, how is it going to get solved? We've got to see it differently. And, that's having people with different skill sets. It's having people with different education, people from, different nationalities. There's different perspectives are needed to solve problems in this new fourth industrial revolution. So just to recap, reflect on your skills and accomplishments, be open to change, be open to learning, practice interview questions, and just be confident in yourself. So thanks for that. Gosh, this was 2 hours. But please feel free to reach out to me if you need somebody to look at your resume, or you need somebody to bounce some ideas off or get some job leads, or you have an interview coming up and you want to do a mock interview. We're here 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. Please reach out to us.